Hi, everyone. I'm Ed Garston, and welcome to episode 111 of Tales from the Beat, where we look at news and PR from both sides of the scrimmage line. And this week, I've got a great guest. He's Greg Migliore. He's a longtime automotive journalist and current editorial director of VerticalScope, which oversees several automotive sites, great automotive sites. Greg, thanks a lot for coming on this morning. Yeah, you're how many different sites do you oversee? I think I saw at least three or four listed.
Yeah, it's an interesting job. I oversee Auto Guide, Truth About Cars, Offroad.com, Motorcycle.com, PetGuide.com, and quite a few others. So it's been a really interesting kind of career shift. Maybe not a full pivot, but I've really enjoyed it. It's a great place to be.
That's cool. And talking about Truth About Cars, we should mention that you've been kind enough to post some selected episodes of Tales from the Beat on the Truth About Cars. So we certainly appreciate that and a little extra exposure, and we can help each other out on that. So thanks a lot for that. Maybe you'll even put this one on. So
Glad to have you.
thank you. Well, why don't we just jump right into it? I've got to ask because that's a top of mind. It seems like everybody in the auto industry is Trump's tariffs, steel and aluminum tariffs. We still have the import tariffs on cars and components hanging over our heads in a few weeks, if that really happens, if he doesn't change his mind again. But um, I mean, are you tariffed out at this point, or are we sort of edging toward an inflection point here where the industry is really gonna be suffering, not only industry but consumers as well?
Yeah, it's really just been like a seesaw, boomerang, pick your cliche. I mean, we literally on the auto guide side, we would send out these newsletters
Yeah.
with like the latest tariff news of the day,
Yeah.
and the proof would come around. And then like 20 minutes later, I'd be like, hey, no, to my site coordinator, we got to rewrite that headline. The tariffs are off or they're back on,
Right.
and it's pretty wacky. Ultimately, I do think it's bad for consumers. You know, they're going to pay more.
Yeah.
The car companies are going to probably have to pass some of this cost along to consumers. I think it's kind of an outdated reactionary approach to the economy. So I think it's not going to be a really, I think, holistic way to try to make these things work going forward. And I think aluminum and steel
Yeah.
are particularly troublesome because there's certain vehicles that, let's just say, tariffs for Mexico and or Canada went into effect and stayed in effect.
Mhm.
Okay, people can maybe sort of figure out what cars might cost more. Maybe the OEMs kind of spread that out. We'll see. But with aluminum and steel, I mean, unless you're buying like some carbon fiber Lambo or something, aluminum and steel is everything. So
Yeah.
I think that's pretty troublesome.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't want to get too political here, but I mean, how can you avoid it? This is a guy who says one thing, then he changes his mind. I was in the same boat as you the other day. I was starting to write something about the tariffs for Forbes.com. And while I was writing, I was two sentences into it when this urgent came over from the Times. You get alerts from the Times that's saying that the press secretary read his little note about, oh, yeah, okay, I guess we're going to put these tariffs on hold for a month. And all of a sudden, the lead and the whole complexion of the story changed and just change a story on a dime. And it seems like there's there's a lot of that going on for all of us. But it's just got to be, eh, you know, so disconcerting for not only industry but for consumers who are already so beat up on the affordability issue. I mean, it's so hard to buy a car when you've got average transaction prices up around 50 grand, and now you're telling me the prices are going to get higher. I mean, I can't buy anything. How are people going to be able to buy the transportation that they need if we keep piling up on them between just the simple price of a vehicle, which is expensive, and then adding this extra cost to it?
I think it's very disconcerting as a consumer. And I'm always kind of sort of in market for a vehicle. I'm fortunate to drive, a fair amount of like the press test fleet.
Yeah.
And then I keep, my wife has a car, and I actually have an older Charger that I just, drive maybe once a month or something.
Mhm.
But as a result, I'm always kind of thinking, well, what should I do? Like, you drive like a Defender, and it's like, that seems cool. What's a used one like?
Yeah.
So it just kind of like trolling the sites, looking for good prices, looking for good deals. It's just, you see the costs are always going up. And I think this certainly doesn't help. I've been fortunate to cover some pretty big stories in my career, like the bankruptcies,
Yeah.
back 15, 17 years ago. And to me, this is the most unsettling story, I think, because it directly impacts costs. And
Yeah.
I think it's short-sighted of, the Trump administration to do this for many reasons. But I think when you look at tariffs for the automotive industry,
Yeah.
it takes years to develop the products,
Right.
get the factories in place. Like, you can't just shift a ton of production
Yeah.
to Metro Detroit overnight and be like, okay, we'll comply with these tariffs. It's
Yeah.
like a long range thing.
Right.
And I think it's going to hurt the companies, especially in the short term, and consumers in the long run. And obviously, I think the inverse is also true. It'll hurt consumers in the short term and companies in the long run. So it's a tough situation. And I
Yeah.
think it's tricky too, because if, say, you're an executive, you're trying to plan and you're trying to think, hey, how can I make this best strategy for XYZ widget car that I'm going to build? I'm going to price it this way. I'm going to market it this type of consumer.
Sure.
You don't know if the tariffs are just like a bargaining chip for Tuesday or if
Right.
they're a real thing. So I think that's also very unsettling.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely short-sighted, and I might add, totally uneducated about the industry on the part of the president, because as you say, what's it take 2 years at least to even just retool a
Yeah.
plant for a new product and millions of dollars to do that. So you can't just say, "Oh, all right, I'm not going to make it in Mexico today. I'll start making it in Peoria on Thursday." It just it just doesn't work that way. And I think you're right, Greg, that it's more of a bargaining chip and just is a more of a bully tactic, which is kind of his MO. But it's hurting people. And now, I mean, not just affordability of cars, but you think about it with the stock market tanking. That's people's 401ks. That's money. That's their money that they're living on, especially if you're of a certain age, like I am. But it just trickles down so far as what people can do with vehicles. And now, I mean, are you seeing? I know we reported, and I saw a story on Reuters yesterday, a similar story about people now rushing to dealers to try to beat the tariffs, or at least uh, if they can't do that, then rethink their situation and say, well, I buy a used car since it wouldn't be subject to tariffs anyway. I mean, are you seeing any sort of trend like that?
Yeah, we do. So we do these like monthly studies at Auto Guide, and we use this service called Auto Finder that is
Hmm.
like tracks marketplace, listings and all that. And we're starting to see some indications that people are kind of getting nervous, trying to like actually get out there and get ahead of this. And that's like the data is starting to trend in that direction. Like, just anecdotally, people are nervous. You're
Yeah.
wondering, hey, can I still get that $7,500 tax credit? Is it going to be
Hmm.
harder, for EVs? And I think if I were like actually really in the market for buying a vehicle, I would be very much like, let's go. If I find a price that I think is good, I would go for it. It's tough with used cars. That just is like, to be very disappointing as a consumer, because I always thought, hey, a used car it's great for people who maybe don't want to or
Yeah.
can't afford something new. And then if you're maybe like kind of also have like an enthusiast bent like I am, it's like, well, okay,
Yeah.
maybe take a 5-year-old Toyota 4Runner. That sounds kind of fun. Drive that for a few years
Yeah.
and you get it at a much better price.
Sure.
Now, forget about it. Used car prices are through the roof. You
Yeah.
probably saw that study like last week that said the average price of a new car was very close to 50,000 for the first time ever. It's
Yeah.
been hovering at like 48 for the last probably year or two.
Right.
So are just pricing people out of cars. You know, they're just going to keep driving old cars.
Yeah, and one thing I heard, it was a little while ago, maybe it was from Mannheim, where that the criteria for certified pre-owned, they were broadening the criteria so older vehicles could now be captured under that. And I know you get the inspections and warranty with certified pre-owned, but still, I mean, you're talking older cars, and you're supposed to be getting that confidence that the vehicle is going to be okay, even though it's got so many more miles on it. So um, I don't want to linger on that because really, the theme of what we talk about here is more of editorial and getting along with PR and things. But Greg, I was very curious because you're in charge of sites that over the years people have gone to learn about what's going on in the business and especially what's hot, what the products that are hot and trends. I was just curious as to now, with this being such really cataclysmic news in the industry, how are you sort of balancing being, portraying that news, conveying that news with what your core audience really expects from the site?
You know, that's interesting. I've seen that since even when I was almost like a rookie auto reporter. I started out as a web reporter at Auto Week, very enthusiast, product racing, frankly, a good chunk of it.
Yeah.
And we still covered a lot of the industry news back in like the early 2000s.
Mhm.
And I think what I've found like now and then just over this sort of arc of my career is that you kind of have to be there.
Yeah.
It's like you've got to be able to, you do it within the treatment, the scope of what you are and what your readers want. Like you don't want to beat them over the head with like
Mhm.
a ton of industry news every day,
Mhm.
but you got to cover it because in this case, like tariffs, bankruptcies, some other things that does impact like their purchase decision. So I think you've got to give it to them. In our case, maybe we put up like, I don't know, 10 stories a day on Auto Guide,
Yeah.
one or two might hit on tariffs, that type of thing.
Sure.
So it's got to be a mix, it's got to be a balance.
It's interesting that you're doing that because I was having a discussion yesterday about the effect of SEO, search engine
Yeah.
optimization. And I know when we're writing stories for online at Forbes.com, everything has to be SEO optimized. And I find that thinking that people are getting their news through searches, and I don't, I don't mean to sound like a Luddite, but I'm not believing it because even though when I see stories and content stacked with keywords, it's not necessarily getting the traffic. So I was just interested from your standpoint then, are you seeing your traffic more driven by search or from loyal readers who have come to uh, be loyal to your sites and trust your sites for the content that they expect about the auto industry?
It is both, I think. I think what we have is and it's very site specific too. I think with SEO, I mean, we could probably have like multiple podcasts that no
Yeah,
one would want to listen to
right.
about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But I think it's almost like table stakes in poker. Like you
Mm.
got to optimize each article the best you can. You've got to try to steer into topics that are at least either in the news or clicky. And then you've just got to use that as like a way to inform your coverage and your news angle. I mean, you can't, at the end of the day, like your auto guide, you're the truth about cars, your pet guide,
Mhm.
you got to write what you think your mission is and stay true to that. And the rest kind of feeds into it. Like there's a lot of flu and colds going around. So I
Yeah.
take emergency vitamin
Right.
potions, and I think that helps,
Yeah.
but it's no guarantee. That's just like, to me, that's like keyword research.
Sure. Sure. Now, do you deal a lot with PR people in the automotive industry, or is it more of your writers and yourself doing more sort of enterprise work?
Yeah, we get pitches all the time. I get a fair amount of pitches.
Mm.
If it's a good pitch or a good pitch to like an event, I sort of welcome that.
Yeah.
That's useful. You can find out, hey, here's this thing I might want to go to. Probably 25% of it is useful.
Yeah.
Some of it is sort of like I don't want to call it old business, but it's like typical business.
Right.
Like, hey, here's this press launch.
Hmm.
Would you like to go or send somebody?
Yeah.
Stuff that like they know you want to do, that you probably want to take advantage of it.
Sure.
Um, cold calls can be, somewhere between not useful and annoying.
Yeah.
But, it just depends. Everybody's got a job to do, as long as it's not like,
Sure.
hey, so clearly off topic that you're like, you know, did this person even know what your publication is? That's when you're like, I don't know. But
Yeah. Well,
honestly, most of the stuff I get is actually pretty useful at this
is it?
point.
Well,
I think part of it is because I've been at VerticalScope for a little over 6 months. I think a few people don't have my
yeah.
email.
Oh, right.
But
Yeah.
in some ways, the
Yeah.
click-through rate, if you will, is a little bit better than it might be.
I get, I don't know how I end up on these lists. I've got pitches. I get everything from fashion
Yeah.
to I got some on candy. I got this thing about
Oh, okay.
attending a preview on candy. Well, all right, sure, I would go, but I can't write about it. And somehow I
Yep.
get in these lists, and once in a while, I'll if they've written the pitch in a professional way, I'll usually say, hey, I don't want you to waste your time anymore on me. I'm not your guy, but but
Yeah.
no harm done. I just want to let you know. I'm just curious too because we talk a lot here about um, the quality of pitches and how they're written. And if you're finding that these days, I'm finding a lot of pitches are not good. They're either too long, they don't tell you there's no news in them, or they clearly don't understand what I'm writing about. And I'm just curious, Greg, as far as what you're seeing, um, and how you kind of deal with it. Do you ever sort of inform the PR person that, hey, maybe you have the threat of something here that might be decent, but this pitch just isn't making it for me.
Yeah, I generally don't do that as much. I think like back when I was doing more of like beat stuff and it
Yeah.
was like, hey, I want to try to build this relationship, I
Mhm.
would reply and be like, well, do you have something else? Or I'm interested in this. What else could you have? Because at that point, it takes five
Yeah.
minutes to send an email. It's not that big a deal. Maybe you build a
Sure.
relationship or get something closer to what you might want. I
Sure.
generally don't do that now. And I don't think a ton of like, my editors and writers do that either, just because also the news business I think has actually gotten even faster paced, because everything has to go up like right away.
Sure.
And it's got to be right, of course. Like it's not like accuracy is declined. It's still just as important, at least in my view.
Yeah.
So I think, if anything, you have less time to probably in some ways build those relationships, which
Yeah.
is unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you seeing any obviously AI written pitches? I've gotten a few, and they're pretty funny actually.
Yeah, I've seen a few press releases that will come over on also on some of my more like
Mhm.
I have like atv.com and again pet guide and some of that you'll get stuff from like um like the manufacturers in those spaces and it's
Yeah.
it's pretty clear you're like, well, that doesn't just it
Yeah.
doesn't sound right, and maybe it's not all AI, but you definitely it makes you wonder, is this,
Right.
written and then edited by somebody or something in a very
Or something.
yeah. So you're starting to see that. And
Yeah.
I don't think AI is necessarily bad. I think it change is inevitable. It
Hmm.
might be a good thing.
Yeah.
There's plenty of like, rudimentary, boring jobs that journalists of all levels do that we could probably clean up.
Yes.
So, we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tool. You just have to use it correct. I saw something scary. What did you see? It was it this morning or last night? AI generated anchor people. It looked like
Oh
a
wow, that's
co-anchored
scary.
TV newscast, but it was AI generated a man and a woman that looked like they were on camera leading a newscast. And I mean, I was in television for a long time, and not to be rude, but I did work with a couple of robots here and there. It seemed like robots on the set where,
Yeah.
that's just being rude. But to see this happen, it's kind of weird. Before I let you go, what's hot to you in the auto industry? What do you see as far as the sort of the hot trends that you're looking at for 25 here?
Well, I think we're going to see a lot of new product come out, which should be good. That's always exciting. I'll be interested to watch. This is kind of niche, but F1 has been kind of growing in the United States in the last few years in North America. I'll be interested to see if that trend continues. I like the sport.
Yeah.
You get the dog days of summer, and like I
Mhm.
like baseball. Hopefully, the Tigers are great this year,
Yeah.
and of course golf. But like Formula One is nice. It's a good opportunity, I think,
Love
for
it.
North Americans. So we'll see.
Oh yeah. What do you think
I
of GM getting into the circuit?
I think it's somewhere between maybe a passion product or project.
Hmm.
It seems like I don't know if they're ever going to really it's going to really pay off for them. But at the same time, I love it. And I know I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here. They have a
Hmm.
great racing history. It goes back to the early 50s when they raced
Yeah.
Cadillacs. I think if anybody could do it, it's certainly them. I mean, who has more money than them when it
Right.
comes to
Yeah.
throw it at marketing and sports? So
Mm.
I think I don't know if it's a great risk, but I like it. I like it a lot.
I do, when I went to college, I'll date myself in the early 70s. It was only, it was in upstate New York. We were about an hour and a half from Watkins Glen,
Mm,
and we'd sneak into the Grand Prix. This is the days of Jackie Stewart and Niki
yeah.
Lauda and James Hunt, and it was $15 for a ticket, and you bought the ticket downtown, and we bought one ticket for three of us, and then we'd hide in the trunk of the car. And get in on one ticket, and we'd stand right by the rail and watch the cars in the F1 races. Just so awesome, so awesome. Well, Greg Migliore, thanks so much. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast for this episode. I love your sites. They're so good. They're so authoritative. And when I started doing social media for Chrysler back in 2000, I actually learned so much, especially from the Truth About Cars, on how to do it the correct way. Original editor Bob Frago, who he bust my chops a little bit, but it was okay. It was all in good fun. But I really appreciate what you do, your insight, and appreciate you being with us on this episode of Tales from the Beat. And everyone who's viewed this and listened to this episode, thank you so much for your support. We appreciate you subscribing and being loyal to the webcast. You can catch us on Spotify and on YouTube. And we'll be back soon with more tales. I'm Ed Garston. Take care.